Hello, everybody. Welcome to TC meeting. Actually, we're not giving these numbers, so it's TC meeting the 21st of January, 2015. I'm Rod Vag. We have Michael, Dominic, Denicola here as well. We've got Bert, Chris, Colin, and Fedor and Isaac. So before we just get started, I wanted to clarify one thing. There was a bit of uncertainty on IRC about this, but the meeting, not everyone in this meeting is on the TC. There's three of us that are not TC, myself, Michael, and Dominic. I'm not TC. We're basically in the observer or facilitator mode. Ben's joined as well. So Ben, Bert, Chris, Colin, and Fedor and Isaac are on the TC. Trevor won't be joining us today. He's also TC. These guys have voting rights here. The rest of us are just here to help grease the wheels. So let's get started. We've got an agenda document we're working on. So first of all, let's do a mini stand-up to find out what everyone's been doing this week. Who would like to start that? Bert, do you want to start at this time?
Sure. Yes, I'm trying to remember when the last meeting was. That was just before the release, right? So, the release. After that, I've been mostly working on polish, so fixing Windows installer issues. I think that's the most common thing that came up, and I don't quite remember it. Were all small issues. And then in the sort of more future-facing development, I've been looking into ICU. Hopefully we'll be able to cover that later in this meeting a little bit. And another cleanup kind of thing, which is move the entire Windows build system to JIP and not have an MSI project for the installer, and hopefully that will make things a little bit easier. But I'll explain when I'm done with that. That's it for me. Next person maybe is Ben, if we go alphabetically.
Yeah, hi. I have been mostly fixing bugs, reviewing pull requests, just ordinary maintenance, nothing really that stands out. Chris, what about you?
So in the last week, I've been trying to concentrate on ripping out places where the io.js stream subclasses reach into the private state of the streams, trying to like shore that up and kind of like cauterize that a bit, and worked on some TLS stuff with Wraithen of New Relic at the beginning of the week, which is pretty fun. Isaac?
So I think the next alphabetically would be Colin.
Yeah. Are you able to hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry. I've just been reviewing pull requests. I was actually traveling most of the last week, reviewing issues. I started kind of playing around with moving some variable statements over to use new ES6 constants. That's pretty much all I've been up to. So I think Fedor is next.
Okay, so I wasn't really working on io.js this week, except probably commenting on some issues and pull requests. So currently I'm busy with the big project, which is a JIP in reverse. So it's yeah. So the link is here, and this is probably something that we may wish to consider once it will be done. So it's a replacement for JIP written in C, but right now it's just a stop. So that's all from me.
What's funny is that it's not in Python, and JIP is in Python, but this one actually has pi in the name.
Yeah. Oh, I'm fine with it.
Yeah, but written in C could be nice. Anyway, I am mostly just been doing npm stuff to get private modules out the door, help with all those things. Otherwise, commented on a few issues around streams, I guess I'm going to be joining the streams working group as a minor Slacker member, and try to get the discussion going around having a process.release rather than adding another thing to process.versions, because there's a few cases where people need to be able to differentiate between io.js and Node, and I don't want us to go to a ridiculous user agent string kind of accretive API wart, but I fear that it may be inevitable. That's it for me.
Michael?
Oh yeah, sorry, I was slacking there. So website stuff is going really well. That working group is up and running. I'll update more on that later. And got a bunch of social media accounts up for io.js. So now we have this Google Plus page that we're doing this from. We have like a Facebook page. Fyodor set up like a Twitter a while ago, so I'm trying to bring some organization around that and spin up like a group of people that want to help with the messaging and with social media stuff. And I'm about to turn my attention to the roadmap repo, which we sort of forgot about because everybody was saying the same kind of top 3 things. But we've done those now, so I'm going to go back there and try to continue to gather like momentum and feedback from the community and try to bring that feedback into the TC here.
Dominic, do you want to contribute here?
Sure. I mean, not too much for me. Mostly just, I guess I help with the changelog getting release out, and then just kind of trying to poke in on the V8 issues and like clarify, this is the release that's going to be with Chrome, whatever, and kind of get our strategy clarified around that. And updating the ES6 page as we roll new releases.
Cool. So me, release. Actually, 4 releases have we had? 1.0.3. We've had 4 releases since last week. I've been doing a bunch of stuff with the release process, trying to make it much more automated so that it doesn't have to rely on me. And we're going to discuss at this meeting about how we can. Well, I think we're going to discuss it. How we can expand that list of people who can do it. Been poking around at Node.js. I have a work in progress code change to suggest to Node.js. Even though I did suggest one initially, but it was just using the version string that wasn't acceptable. So we've gone to this process.release proposal, and I've been working on some code to match that. So still need to push a PR to Node.js with that new stuff. I think that's everybody now. So, quick review of last meeting. We went over file copyright policy for the 3rd time, but that was just to accept a new license file that referred to io.js. And we looked at governance, but we deferred that again to this meeting. So that's issue number 234. We're going to discuss that for the 3rd time. State of ES6 on io.js thread, which was basically about the V8 upgrade policy. We only discussed the upgrade to 3.31 over 3.30, and I don't think we did anything beyond that. So, but that's scheduled again to talk about this week. And then we went over a 1.00 release checklist. That was where we spent most of our time. Ticking off items and delegating tasks, and the most interesting and successful one from that was the change log, I thought, which Dominic took responsibility for on Twitter on IRC, sorry, and gathered a whole bunch of people to make a change log, and that went really well. So that was good. So into the meeting, unless anyone wants to pipe up about anything about last meeting, we'll just get straight into it. Issue number 403 was to invite Dominic and Nicola to the TC meetings. Dominic's here. There wasn't any disagreement on GitHub or private discussions about this, so Dominic is here as in observer status. So I think we can tick that off unless there's any dissension, but I don't think there was anyone left to dissent. Isaac says done in the thing, and he was the last +1 to give on that, so all good. So the next one was issue number 234, which was this big one that we've been deferring. This is add new collaborators. Now, we're still stuck on the initial list of collaborators. There's probably quite a few more. Well, there's probably a few more since that initial list that could go up, but let's focus on this initial list of proposed collaborators to add. We've discussed this a bit in previous meetings about how to go about doing it, how to view contributions, and the process around here. Does anyone want to get started that was keen to punt this issue last time? Does anyone have any more mature thoughts about this to add?
Yeah. So I think I came up with a compromise that we can all live with. So Chris offered to sort of come up with something like an onboarding program, like a hangout with new contributors and some materials for them. I'm sure that he'll have like a limit of the number of people that he can do in each one of those and still be effective. So I'll just leave that to him. I think that we should just go into that thread and just ask, the first 5 people, the first 10 people, however many Chris says that he can handle at once. Those people that raise their hand, they get the commit bit that week. They get dumped into the meeting with Chris. We iterate on this onboarding process going forward, and we keep sort of grabbing people each week out of it. This is also dependent on anyone who wants to poke into that list and say some of those people should not be candidates for this, then they should do that. But this is a way to sort of responsibly ramp up, do a few at a time, and hopefully more than in the future more than just Chris can do this, and we can maybe even do more than one a week if we're getting that many new candidates. What do you guys think?
I'd be happy to do this.
I am super excited about the onboarding program. So in that sense, yes, go for it. My suggestion would be though to find people that are actually willing to do anything at all, because so far this list has been just made, and some people have responded that they're interested, but others have not responded at all. Yes, that's a good idea. The thing I sort of like for consideration is that in a way I think of commit bits as not extremely relevant. It's useful, of course, to have more people that can sort out issues or that can do things, but that requires of them that they sort of work with the team that maintains io.js on a day-to-day basis. The other thing I'd like to consider is, can we give more people voting rights? Like we've also punted on this issue until we would have something like an actual fork or a release maybe. But I think like having this very limited list of people that can now vote that are not necessarily more active or better than other people in the community is a bit weird, and so I'd like to consider making having more like a public voting system where hundreds of people that have something to do with Node or that have to face the consequences when we make a dumb decision to give them all voting rights. And I imagine that would be about issues. Do we want to have an off feature on the event emitter? Is that something that's not something I feel that the TC is really qualified to decide?
So I mean, this is a bit of a divergence. I'd actually like to. So separating the new contributors from the voting rights issue. I think that we should create a GitHub issue about the voting rights stuff and talk about it, and maybe like bring it back to the next TC meeting. But I will say what we're doing in the roadmap repo is trying to get that kind of feedback from a lot of people. Like if we want to know, if we want to get feedback from hundreds of developers, like should we have an off switch? We should do that through the roadmap repo, and then when that feedback comes into TC, it's just going to get rubber stamped anyway, right? In terms of like putting people on the TC and giving them voting rights, I would love to have more, and I think that the list of people that we consider come from the contributor list, and so we need to resolve this like adding more collaborators, like today, so that in a few weeks we can consider more people for voting rights in the TC.
I have a question about the onboarding program. For people that are contributing code, is an onboarding program really necessary? because a new contributor will file a pull request, one or more TC members will review it, probably review it a couple of times, and if all goes according to plan, the new contributor will pick up quickly enough how to actually write new code, how to fit in the process. I imagine an onboarding program would be useful for people that are more into triaging issues, so gardening the bug tracker. But Chris, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, that's actually you kind of touched on the point that I wanted to make. Specifically, that code can be picked up through like pull requests, but how we review code, how we deal with issues, cultural things are harder to get across in this like pull request process, and it's hard to like impart the idea that like we support our collaborators in that respect. Like if they should feel empowered to take action on the issue tracker or in the repo without fear of like stepping on anybody's toes or doing anything wrong. We want to actively encourage them to like take ownership of parts of the repo and the tracker.
Basically, this is the kind of the like apprentice idea that TJ was pushing for in Node Core in Joint Node, but in a faster way and with a little bit more inclusion. And I think that you don't need to like, it doesn't need to be this big long 6-week boot camp kind of ridiculousness, but some very brief like instruction on like, look, this is how you do things. This is what we're shooting for. If you make a mistake, we are here to help, and we'll point it out, but like, don't be afraid. We don't hate you. I think that will go a really long way to having people feel more comfortable actually doing productive and useful work for us. So I think it's a great idea. I also think that doing it in this kind of a format rather than just on GitHub is a little bit more approachable. It's a little bit more like you can talk to a real human being who's there to help out. And Ben, I've actually seen you do this really well with new contributors. So I mean, I think that it's something that will be very, very beneficial. Back to the earlier issue that we kind of punted on, or that Bert had brought up. I think that there's a huge value in having a large set of collaborators and a small TC, precisely because there's going to be issues where you might want to take a poll of your kind of collaborator base. And if we had like just imagine in some lovely future where we have like 200 people who have their commit bit, and most of them are not really doing much with it. We could still kind of basically say like, look, you've landed a patch in Node. You have a voice. Here's an issue that we kind of want some feedback on. Present, give it a +1 or not. And anybody who participates then has a voice in that issue. And then that kind of gets some of the benefits of the Apache style voting type of methodology without having to have these meetings with 100 people in them all the time for high-level governance stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of get it for free even without tooling, right? Because if you add 200 people, as say we have 200 people with commit bits at the end of the year, those are 200 people that probably also watch the repo regularly. If you post an issue like, hey, should we turn this thing off or add this feature, the people that care about it will weigh in with a +1 or a -1. And people from the community will do that as well, and you'll see the difference between collaborators and them by the little like badge. So we sort of, yeah, I think that we'll actually get that. Really.
I think that's mostly right. The thing is, right now we kind of ignore, like there are people that +1 or -1, but we kind of ignore it, or we don't really acknowledge it. And the other thing is that it's always kind of unclear what, is there like a splinter group, debating some very exotic issue, or is this a broadly felt thing in a community? I think that's usually very difficult to tell apart. And so if maybe like we can do it as an experiment by just saying, hey, here's what we're not going to decide. Everybody who cares can say +1 or -1, and we'll see what comes out of it, and we'll actually use your advice. And maybe that's a way to start. But like I think the voting system as it works nowadays is practical from a really from a developer standpoint, where people work a lot on io.js. But there's a large part of the community that does care about what's going in, or maybe changes that we make to Node, but they don't have to, but they don't have time to actually participate in development, or or even to follow all the GitHub issues. So my suggestion, maybe we should try it with some issue. Just try a larger group voting system.
So, Bert, I actually plan on tackling this exact problem over the next couple weeks, like mainly by bringing some new organization to the roadmap repo and trying to quantify some stuff. I think like maybe we should have sort of like a roadmap working group or something like that, where all we're trying to do is get feedback from the community on where we should go and what kind of changes that we should make. And like I would love to have you on that with me, trying to like pick the right tools and solicit the right kind of feedback from people.
That sounds about right. Okay, let's do that.
Okay. Okay, so are we all? Is nobody -1 on the plan to take whoever raises their hand first in that thread for commit bits, and Chris following up to onboard them?
Not -1, but I know a few people who would like to have commit access, and whom I trust to basically do the right thing. What I mean is, I'm pretty sure there are already a few people that don't really need the onboarding process.
Well, I think
it should be something that we offer, not necessarily something that's required. Just like, hey, we're gonna, let's say we go and we add all of those people who are in this issue, right? All the people who are added on that number 234 or whatever it was. Like, we should probably also reach out to them and say, hey, we're gonna do this like hangout for new collaborators on a weekly or bi-weekly basis or whatever, and if somebody doesn't feel like they need it, then okay. But if they continually break the rules, then they're going to get removed. So I think it's more just sort of a matter of helping people be successful, and we don't really need to make it a requirement.
Okay.
So I want to follow up with that just a little bit. I do think that in the future we may not need to make it a requirement, but being that this is like VO.1 of this onboarding process, and I'm sure that Chris would like feedback from people that already know what's going on, I think it would be great if we could take those people that don't need onboarding and ask them to be in the first onboarding so that they can give really good feedback about what may or may not be there.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good point.
Yeah, I agree with that too. People should just take it. It should not be extremely long. It's also good for us to get an idea what they are planning to do, maybe, or just to get acquainted. So yeah, I'm actually in favor of everybody just taking the onboarding process.
Cool. I'll get working on that, and I'll have a document up with what I plan to do, or respond to the issue with what I plan to do by the end of the day.
Yeah, I
Nice.
think for me, I think the onboarding process will be mainly helpful to, as we've already said, let people know that they are invested with authority here, that they can go through and close issues, that they can comment on things, they can escalate things, they can merge pull requests. Just to let people know that this is not just a token thing, that you're actually part of the team here. Just go ahead and make stuff happen. And contribute to even how the process works. So, and also giving the opportunity for them to ask questions about process, about technical things like the whole how do you merge stuff. Like, that's complicated to make it fit within the contributor guidelines. People may have questions about that. So yeah, okay. So we're going to take anyone that +1's in that thread who's in there now. There's also, we added a couple more. We added Fish Rock and is it Card? Q-A-R-D? I don't know how you pronounce that.
Word, yeah, that's Steven Belanger.
Yeah. Okay. So and I think I think those two are good ones. They're not necessarily heavy code contributors. So Jeremiah hasn't, I don't think, contributed a large amount of code, but he's been very instrumental in governing the process from the very beginning. IRC, GitHub, everywhere. So those two, I think, are good candidates to add to the list, the initial list anyway. So if we just go with that list for now, and then start the process, and okay, so Ben's already putting someone else in the thing. So if anyone else wants to get wants to nominate a good contributor, do that now in that list, and then by next week we will have gone through one cycle of this. One of us, perhaps me, will go through and look over all the pull requests that have been accepted since this initial list and see if there's anyone else that is obvious for adding, and then we'll do it again. So instead of, don't do it in the chat for this meeting, do it in that thread, and we'll get that happening. Okay, so that is that accepted by everyone, that process? Or is there anyone that disagrees?
No, sounds acceptable to me.
Yep, sounds acceptable. Go for it. Yeah, great.
Cool.
Awesome.
Okay, Michael, I'm going to give this one to you because you actually made that issue. Stabilization and release cycle and process, issue number 405. Take it away, Michael.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of stuff in there. The main thing that I want to get to is that I think we have some sort of like tacit agreement, but we haven't spelled it out yet, that we would like to align more closely with the V8 cycle, so that when we have issues in V8, they're getting a lot of attention over there, and we can increase the collaboration with the V8 team in a way that we haven't really been able to do, being like a year behind a lot of the time. That means that we'll probably stabilize each of these cycles sometime, either weeks or months after they ship it in Chrome. But our unstable cycle is sort of lining up when they're unstable and they're working on this. The complexity that this has added, and one of the reasons why I thought that it was really important to bring into like the TC meeting, is that our decision to go with Semver and not to use the designations after the dot adds some really nasty like stuff when we track V8, because V8 will make, in this unstable cycle, changes to the public API, and then if we're actually going to follow Semver, then we're going to have to start like incrementing our version number during an unstable cycle, which I don't think that we want to do, and it's really hard to message that. So, and I mean, Dominic, I'll let you come in from here so you can tell us more about the V8 cycle, and you're very familiar with Semver, so take it away.
Yeah, I mean, basically the idea is that we, Chrome, V8 is synced to Chrome releases, and they expect embedders to be using, whatever's in the latest stable version of Chrome, because, up until the point where it gets, they do a branch cut to ship Chrome, and anything could change at any time, right? There could be horrible bugs and various things. Things are not production ready in any way. And so kind of the direction I was seeing on that thread with Michael is that we want to at some point align so that we're stabilizing, like io.js has the same V8 releases as stable Chrome does, and then when stable Chrome gets an upgrade every 6 weeks, we get an upgrade every 6 weeks. And currently we're about 6 weeks ahead, so we'd want to wait for that to settle for Chrome 41 to be released, because currently we're on V8 4.1. And then we'd wait another 6 weeks before we upgrade to V8 4.2, which corresponds to Chrome 42. And that way we should be able to, because they won't break backwards compatibility between V8 releases once they've shipped to stable Chrome, right? Like before that, they're essentially just they're pre-releases, right? They're not using Semver in any way, but they're pre-releases until they get to stable Chrome. So that's kind of my thoughts on the issue. Did I miss anything? I don't know.
So the proposal is to just stick with the stable version of V8 that's in the current version of Chrome.
Yeah, and I think you could also make an argument that you'd want to have some kind of experimental testing thing that people who want to test, just like Chrome has beta and dev and even Canary, we could have similar things with bundled versions of V8. But people should understand that, from one day to the next, the beta version of io.js or the Canary version of io.js or whatever could have a breaking change, and that should be totally within the contract. And I think that would be useful because then we could start feeding back in and catching bugs early instead of relying on Chrome testers, which have a different set of use cases to catch them.
Yeah, well, sounds perfectly reasonable to me. I have one question though. We have discussed long-term support releases in the past. How would that tie into, well, yeah, to Chrome release? Because Chrome updates every, 6 weeks, and after that it's more or less abandoned.
Kind of the perspective of the Chrome team in general, and V8 in particular, and V8 as well, is that this is just the web. Like, we cannot have old, outdated code, on there, and the best approach is to get everybody on the newest stuff. Now, we might have different trade-offs, and indeed even Firefox has made different trade-offs with their long-term support. But I think that if we want to do something different, then we're probably going to need to take on some burdens ourselves of backporting patches, as security holes and so on are discovered.
I mean, we're also going to have to be we're going to have to be in the future where we've had a ton of releases and have some understanding of how often all these releases happen and how unreasonable it is for somebody to run something from 2 or 3 years ago. But so I want to come back to like the practical reality of doing this. So right now we're unstable, right? We're binding to the next version of we're binding to the next V8 because we're not going to be stable until the next release of Chrome is out. The only thing right now that designates like that we're unstable is that it says on the website unstable. There's no version designation. And at some point in time we're going to throw up our hands and say we're stable now, and then we'll have a stable line and an unstable line, and hopefully the unstable line will track the next V8, right?
Well, so since we're now switched to Semver, my assumption was always that like io.js 1.0 is API stable, which is what we indicate with Semver, and unstable or beta quality was just that it had been such a long time that we weren't sure that the quality of the release was really good. But I think now that we're at 1.04 and maybe in 2 weeks we'll be able to say, well, this is fine. But in any case, the API is sort of frozen, I would say, for io.js until we bump it.
We haven't actually been living up to that, though, because we've been taking different versions of V8 as they've been incrementing over these last 4 releases, and there have been changes in V8 that map to the language and add features into the language, and we should have probably
We've been pretty good since release. That I'm pretty sure that it's mostly just patch fixes. There's no feature increases.
Yes, exactly.
There is discussion already around. I think there's 3 or 4 issues in there that would increase minor. So we're already discussing how that would impact a 1.1. I was thinking last night that maybe we could do something like use the V8 release cycle to do a minor or possibly a major, depending on what comes, but schedule a minor bump at least with every V8 release. So that would give us like a mandatory 6-week minor version bump, and then we can add in everything else that we would otherwise put in a minor version there.
So I want to do that, but the problem with tying this to Semver is that if we have a 6-week release cycle where we're taking the unstables that are coming out of the V8 team, they're going to like add features to the language and then remove them. And if we're not incrementing our minor because like, hey, we're on a 6-week minor increment cycle, we're either breaking Semver or we're not letting it go V8.
Right. So maybe I think you guys are kind of talking past each other. I think perhaps the issue is that we're in a danger zone right now and for the next 6 weeks, right, where they could be adding and removing features from the language and so on. And so that could very well happen up until Chrome 41 ships. Once Chrome 41 ships, then we can move to a model where, okay, let's wait 6 weeks, Chrome 42 ships, we upgrade to V8 4.2, and then we won't be in a danger zone, and we'll be able to do, kind of like what Rod is saying, where it's only a minor version bump. We don't have any backwards and compat changes. So I think it's kind of a temporary situation.
Well, no, but
So,
like, won't we be in the same situation in the future where I don't think that we want to take a release of V8 and then wait 6 weeks and then update again without having at least some nightly builds and some unstable builds of Node that are taking the incremental changes that are happening that the V8 team is making over
Right. No,
time.
that I agree with, and I guess that's kind of the question. Like, you almost want like io.js Canary that doesn't follow Semver or something like that, right? You want a separate channel. You don't necessarily want it to be in the same linear Semver version sequence
I mean,
that normal
maybe
io.js.
we just use that dash designation for like the dash. We just do dash unstable 1, unstable 2 for each of the builds or whatever. Yeah, yeah. I mean, Bert's suggesting the dash pre. I mean, like all of these work. It's just we are coming back to this. We decided that we didn't want to do this, and now I think that we're saying that we do need to do it for the unstable line because it's going to make sense, right?
Yes. So what's the resolution here? I think io.js will just upgrade to stable versions of V8 from now on. Bump our version if needed according to Semver rules, and ideally we'd have a Canary version indeed with a newer V8.
Yeah, I think I agree that pretty much everybody's on track for the first part about the stables and how the versioning works. The Canary thing I think needs a little bit more thought on what the logistics are exactly, and whether it's a suffix in the version or honestly like kind of what I would favor almost would be to completely decouple the rest of io.js from the V8 in this sense, so that you have io.js and then every time a feature gets added to that, you release io.js Canary, which is exactly the same, but it just has a different V8, a newer V8. Like I don't want. What I'm trying to say is I don't want io.js pre to be both stuff we're thinking about putting in io.js but aren't sure about, and new V8 versions. I think those are kind of separate axes, and it would be beneficial to keep them separate, I think.
So that sounds more like something we would want to do with nightlies, though. Like have a nightly that is built with a newer version of V8. Although that works only if V8 doesn't break the API, but they don't do it so often, so that should be okay.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is like the nightlies, it might be good for people to test new io.js features without getting an upgraded V8 version, if they want to download nightlies. And then other people might be like, I don't want to break my io.js FS module. I just want to test classes.
I think honestly though, like to be a little selfish, it benefits the project if we take all of the stuff that we're considering and all the stuff that is in development and give it to beta testers all in one bundle, because we get a bunch of free testing for all the other shit.
That's a good point.
Okay, all right. I think that we're resolved on that point. I'd like to move along to logo selection. So the website.
Hang on. Can we just resolve this? So Bert made a proposal, which was, and we just need to finalize that this is okay. So io.js tracks stable V8, and we bump minor and possibly major as required when they come in, but also have a pre-release that tracks beta. Now Bert is suggesting using a suffix for Semver. So we like to track if we were to. Let's say that the current version of V8 we're on was stable, just as an example, and then the next one, 4.2, is going to be the next stable version of V8. So we're currently on 1.0. We would also have 1.1.0 pre something or other at the end that we would occasionally be pushing to, that would have the newer version of V8 and possibly some also minor additions to, or major additions to the rest of our code base. Is that what we're up to?
Well, I agree about the stable version, but with regards to the unstable version, I want to propose to move that to a issue for further discussion, because it's not.
I think it's a little, because there's like Chrome, for example, has essentially like 4 pre-releases, or it has beta, dev, canary, I guess, and also it has nightly, but I think that's just canary. Maybe Firefox has the differentiation, but like there's a lot of choices here. Currently, we have nightlies, which are in pre's, and then we have stable. or released. And that's probably the right level of complexity, but like the logistics around exactly what the nightlies are going to incorporate and whether they're putting in an issue makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
The
So
other question would be, of course, like who's gonna do it?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'll file the issue and I'll CC everyone who's interested. So Bert, Dominic, anyone else?
No, that's not what I meant though. What I mean is like it's all really nice, but someone has to make these releases of io.js with upgraded V8 every now and then. So if there's volunteers, like of course we should do it.
Oh, you mean upgrading V8? Oh, I'm happy to do that. I mean, it's
Okay.
good for your commit and line count. So yeah.
All right. Well, you'll have a good commit count in the Canary version of in the Canary branch. That's right.
Okay, so I think we're good on next steps there. I want to talk really quickly about the logo selection stuff. So this means that we'll have to select the logo for the next minor release as soon as we start doing these builds, so that the website.
No. Michael. So let's start with the beginning. I know you've been saying we will cycle logos, and I'm cool with that if you do that on the website. No, well, okay. I don't know. I don't have a strong opinion on the website, but I don't want to do it in release builds. It's just too much work. It requires updating of the imagery in the installers, and I find it's just it will make the GitHub repo much larger. So I prefer not to do it and just stick to one.
Not to mention that's confusing to users.
I was actually going to get to that. There's a bunch of other problems that we have too. So, for instance, you'll notice right now that Twitter, Facebook, and the Google Plus page all have different logos because the logos that we've selected for various things only work in certain shapes, and all of these different tools want like a different kind of shape. So we definitely need to pick something versatile that can work in all of these places and then just leave it there. So I agree that we shouldn't be swapping the logo out everywhere. I think that on the website it really helps to differentiate like the next release from the current one, and these lines by having a cool logo selected. And maybe if we have a code name that's for the next release or for each release, then we can base that on the logo image that somebody selects or whatever. That's fine. But yeah, one of the things that I wanted to get to in this logo selection stuff is that I don't think that it's sustainable for us to change the logo everywhere. It's just not.
Good.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So let's see here. What's the next part? Oh, website update automation. So this is a question from Rod probably. We would like to automate the website updates. We basically need a JSON object with all of the information about all of the releases, or we need like a JSON object per release, like checked into the tree. Would it be possible for the build system, when you build a nightly or a release, to, at the end of that process, check in something into the website? So yes, exactly. That index.json. Can you check in the latest version of that into the website on each release?
Sure.
Awesome. Okay.
But what does that give you if it goes into the Git repo?
So if you get checked into the Git repo, then it immediately gets redeployed, and they're working on a build process right now and templatizing everything. So what'll happen is that'll basically kick off a rebuild, and then the website will have the newest release information.
Okay. Well, I was thinking that the deploy process could also trigger a redeploy. It doesn't have to just be a Git.
So we talked about this a bit on the call, but it's actually it makes things a lot easier for developers when they pull down the website and want to contribute to it. If locally they just have all the data that they need for the website templates to all get rendered. So the easiest thing to do really is to just check it in, and also then we have a Git log record of all of the changes that happen to the user-facing website. So.
Is this to be checked into the io.js main repo or to the website repo? Just out of curiosity.
Website repo.
Cool.
So the next part I think is probably like what Rod wants to talk about, which is how often can we do releases? How often do we think it's responsible to be doing releases, and who can release? So Rod, why don't you go after that?
Do I want to talk about that? I don't really care. So my only concern is about yeah, okay. This is about who can do releases as well. So I think there's been an agreement sort of on GitHub that we just do patch releases regularly. I don't know if we should come up with a specific time frame for that, but maybe we need to monitor that over time, and if we start getting slow, we should maybe cap it to like maybe a week. If we've gone a week without doing a patch release, then we should just do one. I don't know, but maybe over time we'll figure that out. For now, we've done 4 releases already in a week, and that's pretty good. So I say we just go with that. The minor version bumping is awkward because, and it comes back to the V8 discussion. There's already 3 or 4 issues in there that could bump minor. How do we go about pulling them in? And do we just pull them in one go and say, here's a minor bump, there, have it? Or do we need some sort of testing period with that? And I think that comes back to the V8 discussion. Maybe we need to punt on that for an issue. Anyone have thoughts on that?
I do. I just want to say, like, I think one of the best things about io.js so far is these frequent patch releases, and the way that it just kind of aligns with how I expect open source software, mostly NPM packages these days, to work. Which is, hey, they accepted a pull request. They fixed a bug. Oh, hey, there's a new release out. I don't have to wait for anything to happen, which is great. Which is exactly how it should work. And kind of in my projects, at least, this is a bit more rare. On the topic of minor releases, I do the same type of thing. Like, I batch my work. Every week, basically, I go and accept all the pull requests I can, and I look at the cumulative result, and it's like, oh, hey, this one happened to add a feature. I better make this a minor, a minor bump instead of a patch bump. And honestly, I mean, I don't. And it's up to you guys, and certainly it's probably more work, I guess, to do a minor release, but I just follow the same thing and be like, hey, this pull request we accepted happens to be a new feature. Let's bump the version. There's no need to coordinate or batch or anything like that. It seems fine to me if we do 1.0.1, 1.0.2, 1.0.3, 1.1, 1.1.1. Oh, hey, 1.2, like within a few days. Like, it's not a big deal.
I don't think it is actually a big deal for us to do a minor bump. It's just a matter of agreeing that this is something we want to have as part of the normal process. We just merge stuff, and then we assess at release time what it should be. We just need to track this though, so that the person doing the release doesn't make the wrong call because they haven't dug into all of the details about everything. So we did have a discussion on GitHub about using tags to tag things that are patch, minor, and major. I'm thinking maybe we don't need to patch things that are patch level. But we should be vigilant about adding tags to things that are minor or major. And then the person doing the release, it's on them to go back and get clarification on anything that they are unsure of. So, if you look at something and guess maybe that should be a minor, you go back to the person that accepted it or the person that put it in and have a discussion with them about it. So maybe that's the way it should work.
Yeah, so first of all, I completely agree with Dominic and Rod about, it's not a big deal to do a minor version bump as long as you don't break people's code that already works. That should not be an issue. As for tracking changes that require version bumps, is it an idea to just ask people to put in their commit message some marker if they change the API? I mean, I feel in general it's already kind of a big deal if people actually change the API. So it's useful to put it in there, and now they'd have to annotate, like, well, is this, a breaking change or just an addition? But yeah, having that annotation would actually be quite helpful, I think. Also, for example, when you compile release notes, because usually API changes are the most impactful, would be easy to be able to label them on top, etc.
So we just decided that we're going to start doing these dash pre-releases for experimental V8 stuff. I think that like anything that is going to break or change API definitely would benefit from the same kind of like having people test it and having it be in this sort of unstable release. So maybe for these things that we want to go into 1.0, 1.1.0, Can we just create a branch for that, put them in there, and then start producing nightlies that are -pre and go on the website every day?
But I think the ones we're talking about here they're relatively minor. All they are is adding functionality to the API. They're not changing it. It's not a breaking change. It's just an addition. So it's just a casual 1.1. I think that's the discussion here, suggesting that let's treat it casually.
I'm not sure if that's quite true. For example, one pull request changes how datagram sockets behave in a clustered application. So, depending on how you look at it, you can argue it's a bug fix. You can argue it's a new feature. It may even break some existing applications. We don't really know because we don't really know how many people use datagram with the cluster module. So I think it's something that needs to be considered on a case-by-case basis.
I think Ben has a good point. We don't know what we don't know, and a good way to find out is by having some releases out there for people to play with that we're saying are pre-release.
So I have no problem whatsoever with having a pre-release version. The only thing is, okay, so here's what concerns me. One of the things that went wrong with Node is that as far as there were releases, they were all like so unstable releases. So you would never know if you would install 0.11.14 whether it would work with 0.11.15. And it's really attractive to just pile up all your changes in one unstable branch and never stick to a particular snapshot of the API for a longer period of time. Well, that's exactly what's useful for the users. If we can ship a version of io.js where we can guarantee this is not going to break your code, it just fixes stuff, maybe it adds some stuff, it's not going to break your code. And so what, in my opinion, we really should do is have make these releases with minor additions that don't break anything as often as possible. And if stuff actually does break people's code, then we want to set basically a timeline for it. Let's say 3 months or 6 months. Say, okay, then all these changes, we're now going to stash them in a separate branch, and then we're going to release them in a.
It's going to be 6 weeks because we're lined up with the V8 cycle, right? So if we're taking the new V8 in each one of the cycles, all the pre-release stuff, the unstable stuff, will ship every 6 weeks.
That's not guaranteed.
Right.
I mean, we just decided that we will track V8, but V8 may not break anything. It may not even require a minor version bump between certain releases. And the other thing is, do we really want to do that? I think making API changes, breaking API changes potentially every 6 weeks, that might be a little bit too often. And that's because we have people, it's not like Chrome, it doesn't auto-update. People would actually have to install that thing. If you're in production, you have to change many machines. That's just too painful for people to do every 6 weeks.
Are you arguing that we need an auto-update system, Bert?
We can talk about that. Actually, it would be quite nice if I could do that. Yeah.
Awesome.
So
one thing I just want to put in before it gets lost is I feel like what Isaac has ended up doing, Isaac and Forrest on NPM, might have some of the benefits with none of the drawbacks. What I've seen them do is it seems like they have weekly, pre-releases that just automatically after a week will get rolled over unless something horrible is found. That kind of gives you some of the benefit of getting people to test it early. Not too much, as Bert was pointing out. Once you put out or I guess maybe when you put out a pre-release, only a very small portion of people test it. But it avoids the idea that we're just going to pile up stuff and not release it if it's just like a weekly rollover.
We have nightlies which we can just use for that, which we are using.
The other advantage of doing the, we first quote unquote release to a tag other than latest, and then after a week we roll that over to the default installation target. The nice thing about that is we never have to deal with Semver pre-releases, which kind of had this weird effect with given the Semver specification.
Okay, so I think what we should do moving forward is that we should are we agreed that we should have these pre-releases and that we should test some of this stuff in a pre-release. Can we do that and branch it and then come back to this whole issue in like 2 or 3 weeks? And if it's just become like a big bucket for stale shit, we'll just kill it.
I don't think we are agreed on that.
Oh, okay. I thought that what Bert was saying, but also concerned about like it being a bucket for stuff that we never ship.
And we have nightlies too, so they effectively are pre-releases. A very small number of people are actually going to use them because they're inconvenient.
I think should we punt on this for now and move the discussion to an issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of sucks, but it would be good to get this resolved because we have some things batching up already that are not being merged simply because this discussion is pending.
Okay, I mean, I think in terms of solving that, I think nobody really objects to just merging in the easy ones, right? I mean, the one that Ben was citing where it's a change to dgram and to datagram and cluster, like maybe don't merge that yet, and maybe want to try and figure out our pre-release story before that so people can test it or not. But the easy ones, probably can just merge and do a patch or do a minor release.
Okay, so let's take that then. Does anybody have a problem with just merging stuff that requires either patch or minor bumps as course of business? Just doing that and then assessing at release time whether it should be a patch or a minor bump. The major bump ones they're the big concern ones, which I'm not so concerned about right now because I think they should be deferred. The discussion should be deferred at least. Does anyone have a problem with that approach?
That's fine. We're only talking about breaking changes, I think.
That's fine.
I mean, I'm not opposed to it technically at all. I think that it is a challenge messaging wise, and like a lot of us are going to have to be really diligent about messaging, like that there is a change in how we version things and what they mean, because those minor updates have meant everything. They've been years apart prior to now. So we're just going to have to be really diligent about messaging it, but I think it is a direction that everybody thinks we should go in.
And one thing we can do to kind of address the concerns is, Rod makes the point we already have nightlies. If we're going to do a minor release and we're even a little bit unsure and we'd like people to test it, we can just say, hey, everybody, please go test, this particular nightly. And if everybody's like, oh my god, it horribly broke things, then we won't do the minor release, right? Like, in some cases we'll do a minor release because we know it's going to be fine. In some cases we might want to just say, please test this nightly for a week before we do the minor.
People never test nightlies or pre-releases. That's just a fact of life. Perhaps, you can ask them to, but and they'll say yes, and they'll end up not doing it. What we perhaps could do, and I'm just thinking out loud here, do minor bumps, and if it happens that that some change does introduce regressions in people's working code, then we just revert the change and bump the minor again, and just write off the offending minor. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, I've done that with.
I'd prefer to be conservative up front about these sorts of things. Like if we even suspect that it could be a major or breaking change, then we bump the major. I don't see a huge problem with a large major number.
Yeah, we're just carrying this historical baggage that we need to get past. So we need a few minor bumps under our belts before we and the community are comfortable with these version numbers just getting out of control, in air quotes.
Yeah. So what I would suggest is that's purely a messaging thing here. So once we release 1.10, we're gonna say, okay, this is why it's called 1.10 is because we added this small feature. That's everything that changed about the API, but it required us to make a Zenver change. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah. The only thing that I'll say is that messaging-wise, the quicker that we actually push out like a 2 and a 3, the easier the messaging gets, right? Because then it's this very clear difference between what was happening before and happening now.
I think it becomes very clear, but I think it also makes people really nervous if you do it too often. So somewhere in the middle, but I think we can punt on the 2.0 issue and move that to GitHub.
Okay, one last minor thing is recording and auditing how these minor bumps are required. So the initial proposal was to put a tag in GitHub for an issue that's a minor bump and a major, and a patch as well. So actually each thing that's merged gets a tag. I think, Bert, you were suggesting putting that into the Git log as well, so that when a minor bump is merged, you put a note in there. Is that right?
Yeah. So it's nice in the pull request, but I imagine the next release we have to look up all the pull requests and see if someone noted an API change in there. I'd like to, if you just mention like API in all caps in the commit message somehow, maybe API change : some description. I don't know. Just say API for now is what I'm fine with. Then we can easily find those issues, and then that makes the assessment at release time really easy.
This would be nice in the collaborator document about when we have to do the reviewed by and the PR URL tags. It'd be nice to have something in there for minor and major bumps. I don't know if someone wants to come up with a proposal for that.
I might look into coming up with an issue so we can discuss it further, but I would like to just use the PR URL, and we can have automation go off and run a script against the commits that are about to go out and tell the person releasing what level of separate bump. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's punt on anything more complicated than tags for now.
Yeah, I think that
I think any changes to API would be in the message anyway, but it'd be nice to just have something strong for this.
So, I think all of the stuff that we just talked about, it's going to make it into its own GitHub issues, right, where we can discuss this further. I don't think that we need to vote on it now. I think that there's enough opinion and we should document it.
True.
And then on the point about who can do releases, because we're talking about what a release means and making all these changes to it still, I would like to punt on who can do releases so that we have a clear understanding of what they are and what they can change before we get into that issue.
So one thing I would like to say about that is that I'd like other people to be proposing releases, so it's not just on me at the moment to say, let's make a release now. If anybody here feels that there's enough stuff built up that they would like to get a release out, I'd like people to propose it like I've been doing, making an issue, listing the changelog, proposing a time for the release, etc. So I don't want to have to be just the person that's proposing a release.
Is there a reason why we just can't do weekly releases? Let's say every, I don't know, Tuesday night we do a release?
Well, we're doing 4 a week for patch releases, so I think...
Yeah, right now we do, but I presume that will slow down in the future.
Maybe, maybe not.
Okay,
I don't know if we want to be limited by that. My suggestion before was to have that as a cap, so if we haven't done one in a week, we get one out, but allowing things to get out more quickly. We've had a lot of doc changes which don't really require release, but there have been other things that it's nice to get a release out and get that stuff in the wild. Anyway, let's punt on that. Michael's right.
Okay, and then the last issue that was in there, or the last point, I also want to punt on until we have better understanding about this. But it was just for stuff like NAN and trying to think of other ones. But there are modules now that the ecosystem depends on that may or may not need to be updated before we do a release that breaks some kind of change, and we just need to coordinate that better. But we'll talk about that later in the future. So
right, one thing about NAN, I actually tried to make it work before the 1.0 release, and it kind of did, but the NAN release was held up for 1 or 2 days, which introduced a kind of, a minor bump. But presumably this is up to Rod and me, I suppose, because we both work on none. But we should just be vigilant and make sure NAN is updated by the time a new release comes out.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my point is that last time that we talked about this, the reason why we thought that it was better to rely on NAN and to really push people towards NAN rather than trying to create another compatibility layer that shipped with Node is that we should leverage the ecosystem and rely on the ecosystem for this kind of stuff. But there needs to be a tighter coordination around big breaking changes that go out so that everybody is on the same page and actually works before we go out. I mean, I think that this will work itself out in the future. I just wanted to make sure that it ends up in whatever we produce as a release document.
Okay, we're punting on that anyway. So the next item on the agenda was that issue with issue number 251, which actually is part of the previous discussion. So it was just listed here for completeness. We don't need to do anything on that. Ben, I think you proposed the next one, which was issue number 470, doc bump puny code API stability to stable. Do you want to take that?
Any objections?
No, I don't have any objections.
Nope.
Okay. No, that's settled then.
I think our stability markers are not always super useful, but let's not discuss this now. We are running out of time.
Okay, so working group reports. Michael, do you have anything else to report about website group? You had a good meeting?
Yeah, I do, but real quickly, I just wanted to come back to the idea of these working groups because they've been sort of like haphazard right now. Like we spin up these groups and we don't have like a system for like, hey, are you going to have a meeting? Are you going to take our governance model? Blah blah blah. So I think me and Chris should probably sit down and come up with a document that's like, this is what a working group look like, and this is their autonomy, and this is like if they participate in the TC or not, blah blah blah. So that we can do these more easily and distribute ownership more easily. As far as the website goes, I just wanted to update everybody. So it went from like a few people kind of poking at it to 6 people really actively engaged now and still growing. So that working group is awesome. And now I'm like stepping out of it. Like another person is facilitating it. 2 people are leading the effort for the build stuff. Zeke is going after internationalization, and we have people already signing up to do like translations and shit. So it could not be going better. It's very awesome. And yeah, I think I already mentioned that I'm gonna like spin up some work around evangelism and around the roadmap stuff.
So the streams working group, I think I'm going to have to admit that I don't have time for actually facilitating stuff there, and Chris is going to take the responsibility for making that happen. Probably needs a meeting soon. I was going to document the Hangout on Air scheduling procedure because it's such a nightmare to figure out. I was going to do that today and get maybe something on the wiki about how to schedule a Hangout so that it's easy for everyone. The other one I was interested in was Chris, you wanted to spin out docs to a separate working group. Did you get anywhere with that?
No, not yet, because there's like, for one, it's ripping it out of the makefile, and the other bit is that I didn't want to step on the toes of the website working group. So Michael and I should talk about that a little bit more and see where those 2 things overlap.
Cool. Yeah. We'll get together like sometime this week and start producing documentation and sharing. So.
Sounds good.
Good.
Can I get an update on the streams group though from Chris? Like what's going on with streams and whatnot?
So we have the initial set of members, and I should probably tweet that out, get that out there. I don't have it right in front of me right now, but we have people working on it. There's a couple of discussions going on. We're kind of pending the first meeting to sort of decide like what governance is and what we want streams to look like, what the actual end goal of this is. So that's all pending. Once Rod has some documentation on that, then I'll go for it and schedule it for the next week.
Build, I need to do the same thing for build. So when you guys set up a formalization of the working group process, I'll do the same thing for build. We do have something a little bit complicated, which is we have it's almost a sub working group which is for Docker, and I'm wondering if maybe that should just be separate. The reason it's part of build is because it's part of releases, and also there's a whole Docker image thing that we're using for CI. But the people that are interested in that are sort of separate to the concerns about build and release. So maybe that should be a separate working group. But on that, we do the Docker image.
So one ask when I have a chance to sit down with Chris is a document on how a working group gets approved, spun up, and what it looks like when it starts, and like the conditions by which we create them. So I'll loop you into that so that you can be a part of that and probably spin up this Docker thing.
Cool. So just to report on the Docker thing, the Docker-ioj.js repo has been made the official Docker repo for io.js by the Docker folks. So that's gone amazingly well in the last less than a week. So they're already talking about tweaks to that, making them smaller, what to include in the different variants of it. So that's going well. I'm happy to leave that one to the people that are in there, and they've got an informal structure around how it works, but it might be worth formalizing that a bit more.
Awesome.
Okay. Anything else we want to talk about in working group stuff? No. So the other thing in build, I probably should report. The thing that I'm really concerned about with this week is automation of the release process, so that it's mostly automated, so we can sign off on a select number of people that can make releases, whether it's a subset of TC or it's a subset of collaborators or whatever it is. Just have this group of people that we authorize to make releases. We have their GPG keys listed publicly so that they can be used to verify the SHA-SUM files. And they get access to the server with some scripting to just actually make the release happen. It should be fairly straightforward to cut a release, and I don't see there's much complication in here, but I don't think it should just be open to everyone here to just make a release whenever they want. It probably should be there's some release masters basically, and maybe we do what was suggested earlier, which is makes an individual responsible for holding the hands of a particular release through the channel. But at the moment, it's if somebody proposes a release, then they push it through. That's been me. Be nice if it was someone else as well. Anyway, moving on.
Super nice.
ICU, Bert, do you want to cover that if you've got time?
Yeah, it's just a question of what you guys think. But so if you look at what's now enjoying Node, we basically have stolen all their features more or less, or deliberately decided not to have them. Except that what's getting into Node nowadays is ICU, which makes the Intel object in JavaScript work. And so I've done some investigation, and I can get it. I can get it working, but it adds about 8 megabytes to the binary. So give or take, it makes Node twice as large. It's the smallest that I could get it so far. And so I am not sure what to do, because twice as big it's quite a big step. And I kind of want to know, do you guys think we should track Node in this area, and what would be acceptable for additional object code size for this to land?
So personally, I think we should track browsers in this area, which means including it. I think it's weird for people to be like, oh, this built-in JavaScript object doesn't work in io.js. And the other thing I'd say is so yes, it does double the size, but let's pretend we offered 2 versions, one with and one without, and we made the one with the default. How many people are actually going to go and seek out the one without it because they really want those 8 megabytes back? I think it's going to be pretty small. Not that we would necessarily set that up, but that's just kind of a way of weighing how important this is to people.
Well, yes, I think I kind of agree. If in the sense that we don't want to have 2 versions.
Yeah, I think so too. And
I also agree with tracking the browser, but I don't really understand. I mean, I cannot follow the way you think here, because what if we built Express into Node and we had two versions, one with Express and one without? How many people would get the version without? I don't think. I think the situation would be the same. You can, it works as an argument for almost adding anything to Node.
That's fair. That's a good point. I admit it.
So if we're tracking browsers here, like, why isn't it in V8 then? Or is there plans to add it? Can you enlighten us down?
It is in V8, but in
it's in V8.
By default, you get a non-functional international.
No, actually, V8 by
what we have.
Sorry, Bert. V8 by default enables ICU, but you need to actually opt out, and that's what we currently do. And going back to enabling internationalization by default, I think we need to do it. Well, like Dominic pointed out, we need to follow the browsers, and I wouldn't recommend making available two versions of io.js, one with and one without, simply because if we do decide to support internationalization, then we need to go all in and not have people fight with versions that don't have internationalization enabled and have them figure out what's wrong.
Yeah. So the question is, like, Ben, from your perspective, we double the size of Node, like, big deal, not a big deal?
Yeah, well, so doubling the size of the binary is not a big deal in my opinion. What is kind of sad is that it will also pretty much double the size of the tarballs from I think 16 to 35 megabytes. That's pretty steep increase.
I think we're up to actually 19 because we're for some reason a little bit bigger than Giant Node.
Oh, all right, okay, but still, it's going to be a pretty steep increase. We can maybe make .xz tarballs available. That would help a bit.
We already are, but they're only helpful
really?
for Linux. They're not as helpful for Mac because you need to install that compression on there.
What is this Mac that you mentioned?
Apple OS X.
Never heard of it. Sorry.
Oh,
okay, no.
And Windows, I don't know. I don't even know what you do on Windows for that. There must be something out there.
You have an installer. It's small. It's fine. But that also doubles in size. By the way, I tried it out. It really does.
And the other thing, I don't know. Does zlib does it include XZ compression functionality? Can we expose that in Node? Because at the moment, Node.js has to, use gzip, which would be nice if it didn't have to.
I think zlib only supports deflate and gzip, I think, but not xc.
Okay.
Don't quote me on this though.
All right.
The way I view ICU is that it's more of a thing for users to prompt us on. The more we get questions about this on GitHub, the more it should tell us that this is something that's wanted, rather than just assuming.
Yeah, that basically never happens. I think it's mostly a guy from IBM who's doing something with Node, who is adding it to Node at this point. And his argument is like basically the same as Dominic's, and also what I have a lot of sympathy for his reasoning, where we just follow the browser in this area. But yeah, no, I can't remember anybody else ever asking for this feature.
There's been a couple of bug reports that have had to be resolved by saying we don't enable ICU. I've seen a couple of them already.
I may have seen one in the past 5 years.
Yeah, there have been a few, but Joy Node also got a few bug reports before internationalization appeared. So there are people that are clamoring for it.
Okay, well that helps a little bit. So I think what's going to happen is I'll try to make it even smaller, and then we're just going to add it, right? Like, I mean, maybe we'll end up adding 6 megs, almost doubling the size. But
that would be the English ICU only, the small one.
No, what I would do is no, that doesn't matter so much. Like another Mac, and it supports everything, right? So I would just enable all the locales or languages that ICU supports.
Really?
But
I thought it like doubled again if you added anything but small ICUs.
Not exactly. No, it's the biggest space eater is collation tables, and that's about 1 megabyte in size. What adds a lot of more stuff is that ICU can do a lot of more stuff. So there's a data file, and if you don't manually trim it down, it's just its default size, which I believe is like somewhere around 30 megabytes or so. But it also has a lot of stuff, for example, for break iteration lists and I don't know, currency formatting, and a lot of that Node doesn't actually need because JavaScript doesn't support it. So we can just remove all that stuff and still support all the languages for all the features that JavaScript actually has.
How about this as a proposal for moving forward? We could actually invite Stephen Loomis to the next TC meeting, the IBM guy.
Well,
I'm pretty sure he'll be in the middle of it. And then we can hammer him with questions about this. Also, Trevor's been working on this in Joint Node, so he'd have more opinion as well.
Well, I've been following that discussion, and it seems that they're just gonna go for it, and actually, like sort of the state that it is in now is they just ship the full ICU file, and so that adds a lot more stuff even, and they ship it in a separate file. I'd like to have it in the binary itself if we can manage. But okay.
Maybe for quick remark. One quick remark. I believe V8 has a break iterator API that's non-standard, but it's in there. So yeah, I'm not sure.
So what we do is we don't add any break iterator word lists, so the break iterator doesn't quite work. Or maybe we in Node.js we do like delete intel.v8 break iterator, so it's actually gone.
Yeah, so something like that. Yeah, but we need to do something.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Kill the non-standard stuff. Kill it with fire. Make it go away forever.
All right, sounds good. I know enough for now. We don't actually need a resolution to vote on.
So are we going to go forward with inviting Stephen to the next one, or?
Oh, that would be fine. Yeah, I'd be interested. Although I've seen him here and there on RSC already, but maybe it's good for everybody else also. I don't know. What do you guys think? Colin.
Great idea.
Chris. Michael.
Well, it's fun if he has time.
Yeah, I don't think it could hurt to invite him.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good.
Okay. Any other business anyone wants to cover before we finish up?
Yeah, not really. The only thing Michael brought up is logo selection, and of course I told him, no, we're not going to cycle the logos. That said, what you said, Michael, about it's not very consistent right now, that's absolutely true. So, if an actual logo is blessed and it scales from 16 by 16 pixels all the way up to a full screen, or there's a solution for that, I'm of course willing to update the logo in the binaries once more. It's just that I don't want to go through this every 6 weeks. So if you have anything to ask about the selection process itself, feel free to discuss it.
Well, I think that it really helped delineate each line of development on the website when we have here's this type of release and here's this type of release by having a different logo on it. So I like the idea of continuing this process for that part of it, but for the social media accounts, for the build, for all of that kind of stuff, we need a consistent logo that's just the same and scales to all these different cases. And so my suggestion for figuring out what that logo is or whatnot is to hand it off to whoever starts working on the evangelism and messaging side of it, because they're going to be working with the website team a lot already, and they'll know some of the constraints in the different social media aspects as well.
Yeah, I think we've discussed before at these meetings that I don't think TC is particularly concerned about exactly what logo is chosen. Just somebody needs to choose it with thought.
Yes, exactly. And indeed the constraints, very small 16 by 16 pixels up to whatever you need on the website. If you can do that, fine. I won't get involved.
Cool.
Okay, so next meeting is proposed for 28th of January, UTC, 7 p.m. No disagreements to that. I think weekly.
That's an hour earlier than it is now. I'm fine with that.
An hour,
Maybe-
really?
Well, now. Oh yes, UTC. Sorry, never mind. Same time.
I hope it's not an hour earlier. I don't think I can get up an hour earlier. Okay. I think that's all then. Let's close it out at that. It's been long enough already. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. Good to see you again.
Thanks for watching.
Till next week.
everyone who watched.
Thanks for having me.
I'll